This is an impossibly small 4060 gaming PC. It's 4.4 liters in external volume, it weighs just over 8 pounds and can easily be thrown into a backpack, and it also takes up very little space on your desk or under your TV as a media PC. Now, compared to a standard mid-tower 50-liter case, this thing is absolutely tiny, but can play any game at 1080p and most at 1440p in high settings. Now, there's no external power brick here, no modding, no special equipment needed to build it. It can fit a full-powered, low-profile 4060 GPU, and it provides just enough room to cool a mid-range CPU. Now, the 4060 is generally not a very well-received card this generation, but I do find that these very small ones, like the low-profile from Gigabyte and that single-fan version from Zotac, to be kind of exceptions in this area. Because the one thing you can't deny is the efficiency gains that have been made, enabling these small cards to exist. This is a huge step up in gaming performance for a GPU in this form factor compared to the last popular low-profile card, the A2000, which is a much more expensive professional card and does not come near the gaming performance of this card. Now, there's also a new RTX 4000 professional card, but that thing costs like $1,500, while this 4060 is around $320. So the amount of performance that you're able to achieve in a sub 5-liter system today, it's honestly unreal. I just hope that we see this trend continue in the upcoming generations so that we're actually able to continue upgrading these super small systems. Now, I also want to go with a CPU that's reasonably efficient, as we're not going to have a lot of room for cooling. I also want something relatively affordable that won't bottleneck the 4060 at 1080p or 1440p. I landed on the AMD 7600. This is a great entry point gaming CPU that you can often find for around $200. It has 6 cores, 12 threads, and can boost up to 5.1 gigahertz. Now, I think this will balance well with the 4060. It's got a 65 watt TDP, so a low profile cooler from Noctua should get us some reasonable temps. If you do prefer Team Blue, you would want to take a look at the i5 13400 or the 14400 from Intel. I used one in my Velka 3 build a few months back and was really impressed with how well it cooled using that same CPU cooler that I'm using here. Still, if you want better gaming performance, you're going to get that out of the 7600. Now, the board we'll be plugging this into is the Asus ROG Strix B650EI. This has easily been my favorite board so far for ITX AM5 builds. It's got an all-black understated design that will look good in pretty much anything. For I/O, it's got plenty of USB, 2 Type-C, Wi-Fi 6E built in, and 2.5 gig Ethernet. Now, we're also going to use a set of low-profile DDR5 6000 RAM from Corsair and a 970 EVO SSD from Samsung, if you're curious. Now, the GemCase C9 can fit a CPU cooler up to 42 millimeters in clearance. However, it is actually recommended that you go with one around 37 millimeters. This way, your fan isn't pressed up right up against the side panel, causing more turbulence. Now, the ultra low-profile CPU cooler that I'm going to be using is from Noctua. It's called the NH-L9A. Now, this is the AM5 version for, of course, the AM5 socket. Now, unlike many other CPU coolers, these are not universal, so it doesn't come with mounts for other sockets, meaning that you'll need to pick up the right one for your build. It's a pretty impressive little cooler, but it does have its limits, of course. Noctua's site can give you all of the compatible CPUs if you're wanting to use one that's different from the one that I've got here, and I would try to stay within those recommendations if you want to get proper cooling. Now, using this cooler paired with a 7600 at stock, and I'm using a standard fan profile here, I'm seeing the temps in the mid 60s to low 70s after around an hour of Cyberpunk 2077. Now, a lot of these 7000 CPUs do run a bit warmer. This, I think, is actually pretty reasonable for the 7600 with such a small cooler, of course. Now, it's not running as cool as that setup with the 13400 like I mentioned earlier, which I was seeing around the low 60s in a similar situation. So anyways, let's take a closer look at the case here. This is the GemCase C9. It's GemCase's first go at a small case, and I think they're off to a really promising start here. They created this really sleek wood front design that's made of real wood, by the way. On the face, you've got the power button, but also a USB-C port for a little bit of front-facing I/O. There are a few different finishes that you can choose from. I've got kind of one of the darker versions here. I think it looks absolutely fantastic in person. It has a really unique look, and I think it separates itself from the other cases around that same size category. Now, the rest of the materials are made of a powder-coated steel. It's super rigid, and it reminds me a lot of the Velka's build quality. The panels are pretty rigid. They're not going to bend on you easily or anything. I mean, of course, if you push hard enough, they're gonna bend, but you can kind of say that about any thin piece of steel like this. But when you're just handling them, they shouldn't be a problem. Now, the screws that are used to secure the panels are the absolute tiniest fragile screws I think I've ever seen used for case panels, and I'm not really entirely sure why they need to be this small. To give you an idea, here's the screws used on the panels of the Velka 3, and here are the screws used on the GemCase. You're gonna wanna make sure that you use a magnetized screw head with small bit sizes, like the one I'm using here from this video's sponsor, Vantech. So Fantech recently sent over their new E1 Max precision electric screwdriver for me to try out, and I've been quite impressed so far. The whole set is so small, but it's got a lot packed in there. There's 50 steel bits, so it works well across all types of repairs. There's also a pry bar and tweezers that's all neatly contained in a compact package. So you can charge it with the USB-C port on the back, which should get you around 400 screws. And whenever you're ready to use it, you just push down on the top here to release the handle with the tray and all of your bits. On the top of the handle, you can switch between the low and high torque modes, as well as a locked manual mode. Then on the side is the quick switch button, and that allows you to screw in and out. It's all very fast too. It rotates at 200 RPM. There's also an LED light on the front so that you can see if your screws are aligned properly with the holes, which I think is pretty convenient. If you want to check it out for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description, and thank you Fantech for sponsoring this video. Now, while the build quality reminds me a lot of the Velka, the build process is way more straightforward than the Velka. Now, if you've seen my Velka video, you essentially have to take the entire thing apart, mount the motherboard and GPU to the tray on the outside of the shell, and then piece them all back together. Now, that's not the case here. This one is much more straightforward with a few quirks. So there's no need to take it all apart, just remove the top and the side panels. The motherboard drops right in without issue. You can secure it, and then we can plug in the USB-C and the power button. And then quick side note here, because of the short length of this USB-C cable, this actually won't be compatible with the Asus B760i. That board has the USB-C connection up too high on the board, so it just doesn't reach. And they do note that it's not compatible in their description of the product. Okay, so pretty straightforward and simple so far. So now we can just flip it over, and then we can remove the screw on the back that will open up the slot where our GPU fingers need to go. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Now, because of the lip at the bottom and the GPU's position, we actually need to install the GPU and the power supply kind of at the same time. Now, this is going to be much easier if you have a modular power supply, because you can actually just kind of move it over to the left-hand side, but the one I'm using here is not. It's actually the 600 watt flex ATX supply that you can buy from Velcase. So what I had to do is place the GPU in the power supply kind of at an angle, then slide the GPU bracket under that piece in the back, and then gently slide both pieces down into their final positions. You also want to make sure that you connect up the power supply to the GPU before doing this, because once they're in position, it's going to be nearly impossible to reach that plug. Okay, that's honestly the hardest part complete. All we have to do now is plug in the PCI Express riser cable, then secure it, and then secure that power supply to the case and plug in our power connectors and move on to the case fans. And yes, this tiny case can fit 2 case fans, which is one of my favorite differences compared to some of the other small cases. Now, GemCase has a really clever design here where you secure one side of the fan to the front and the other to the rear. Then there's these small pieces that will secure the 2 fans together in the middle, kind of creating like a bridge. It actually worked quite well and was pretty easy to install. So now that's really it. We can just plug in those case fans, resecure the side and top panels, and we're ready to test some games. So Cyberpunk 2077 at Ultra Preset with no upscaling or frame generation, and temps are looking absolutely fine here. Mid 70s pulling between 50 to 60 watts on the CPU, and the highest I've seen at peak was 77, but that was for a brief period before seeing it settle back down to the mid 70s. Now, I'm pretty happy with that considering that the 7600 is known to run quite a bit warmer, especially compared to what I've seen in that mid-range Intel 13400. I could see a situation where a more CPU-intensive game might push this into the mid-80s, but even that would be pretty far from thermal throttling, and you could always undervolt it if you really wanted or needed. The GPU is pulling close to its full 115 watts and maintaining a temperature under or right at 70 degrees Celsius. The finals is a bit more taxing on the CPU, and I'm seeing the temps here stick at 78 to 80 degrees Celsius for the majority of the game time here. Now, noise levels are also pretty decent here. I'm using the standard fan profile and Armory Crate, and it's sitting around 43 to 44 decibels, but when it does need to ramp up to full speed, it is of course much more audible at closer to 48 to 50 decibels. These are some small fans that need to move a lot of heat, so there's going to be some level of compromise when building this small. If you don't mind sacrificing some game performance for less noise and heat, then again, you can check out that 13400 in the Velka 3 video I did. Look, all things considered, I really like this case. Not only does it look really nice with that wood accent on the front, but it's so small and it feels small. Like, it's way smaller than a console, and I think it could make a really good option to put in your living room that's gonna blend in more than a boring black box. And I should mention that it also comes with 2 sets of feet so that you can stand it vertically or horizontally so that it fits better into an entertainment center if you wanted to put it there. But having the ability to just throw this thing in a bag is really convenient. And if you want to take it to a friend's house or whatever, I like to pair these smaller builds up with a portable monitor, or I like to also use my iPad with the Genki Shadowcast 2. And yeah, with that combo, you've got a really nice portable rig. Now, if you want to check out this case for yourself, GemCase actually doesn't have a website at the moment, what you can do is just join their Discord to order it. So I'll have a link in the description if you want to check it out. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.